Hello everyone, my name is Michael SK, and welcome to Higurashi When They Cry, Chapter 7. We are in the third chapter of the Answer arc, and wow, 7 chapters. Oh my gosh, I still remember playing through the first chapter during Halloween a few years ago, or a couple years ago, thinking, oh yeah, this is going to be super spooky, and sure, while it is, the vibe has totally changed, and you cannot really see Higurashi as a horror game of any sort. It is creepy, and there definitely is a mystery behind it, but the vibe is just totally different now, and I think it's better for it. But now that we're at this point here in Chapter 7, people have told me that this is the absolute final, or this is the time, really, of where we are finally going to get answers to the actual mystery of what's been going on here. And what I'm assuming is what's going to take place in this chapter and the next is figuring out how to overcome this major obstacle. Because a lot of the questions that have arose in the beginning chapters and even very recently have seemingly been answered. Like, we know what happened with Keiichi in Chapter 1. He was just a delusional mess. We got that from Chapter 6. We now know that Chapter 2, from Keiichi's perspective, yeah, Mion wasn't Mion, that was Shion. We learned all that in Chapter 5. Along with the fact that the Sonozaki family isn't really the enemy here. Like, they are not the antagonists. Like, sure, they're not great, but they're not the ones that we should be concerned about in the overall mystery here. And Chapter 3 was the weird one for me, and it is still kind of weird. There's a lot of things that I still can't draw conclusions to. But what I can say for certain is that Keiichi was delusional in a very similar way to the way that he was in Chapter 1, and I was able to draw those connections in Chapter 6, or from Chapter 6. And I guess you can really say that Keiichi's friends were trying to help him, and he saw that, no, wait, hold on, there's all this, inconsistent stuff going on, and therefore I need to take evasive action or what have you. Such as when he killed someone, he most likely did, and his friends covered for him, saying that he was at the festival, so everybody in the village believed that. And then Mion, being, an actual friend, basically did the same thing that she did in Chapter 6, and actually hid the body better. No idea how she knew where the body was buried in the first place, but that's most likely what happened, just to help him out. But obviously, it freaked him out in the same way that Rena was freaked out when she was totally not in the loop when she went to look for the body parts in Chapter 6. So a lot of the similar things happened between Chapters 3 and 6, and coming to the end, we saw that there was that whole volcanic gas thing going on, the Great Hinamizawa disaster, which most likely didn't happen in Chapters 2 and 5 when Rika was killed in a different way. And I feel like that's going to be a really important part, not only because that she was killed in a different way, but because there's also people that were killed before Rika was. Yeah. Such as old mama or old grandmama Sonozaki. And I guess Kimiyoshi as well. I know he was there and being tortured at the time. I don't think he was dead, but I think he was tortured. I can't remember the sequence of events, but there is a lot to consider with that as well. I can't really make solid conclusions on some things there, but there are some things to consider. And I will say, after some consideration, I do believe there's some sort of disease going around here. I do believe so. I could be wrong, but I think that there's something going around that actually wiped everybody out instead of a volcanic gas eruption or whatever, which would explain how Keiichi was able to survive that event. He basically wasn't in range of whatever happened. It was an actual attack by, I would assume, our antagonist, or our antagonist group, or whatever. And, yeah, I don't know. There's still a lot that I can't really say for certain, but I think there is a disease that goes around that makes you delusional, makes you angry. Maybe it comes with, if you get angry, well, then you're going to become super delusional. I don't know. And hopefully we can get that answer pretty immediately here. I don't know. But without further ado, we'll jump in here. I just want to say One, I think Takano is a indirect antagonist. Mio Takano, I think, is an indirect enemy here in this series because she's seemingly always around, giving information to the main characters in each of these chapters. And I wanted to bring this up. Has she ever really been wrong? In chapter 1, she, stated real information, albeit probably twisted in a way that made it scarier. Chapter 2, I mean, yeah, the villagers definitely did some weird, torturous shit back in the day. Chapter 3, I don't really remember what she said, but, it's kind of sus how she had Tomatake's bike in her car. And in chapter 5 and 6, well, chapter 5, she just basically handed off her research notes and everything, which weren't necessarily wrong. It's just kind of detailing events from her perspective. Chapter 6 is where it gets a little weird, huh? Has she really ever been wrong until that point? Or was she ever even wrong? And Dr. Irie, I don't know his purpose, but I feel like he does serve one. That's all I gotta say. I just wanted to kind of throw my thoughts out one more time, especially since I took the time to review some of my playthroughs here in some places and just kind of thought about the course of some things here. But I guess let's see if Rika definitely has an imaginary friend, as the Steam cover is implying. At least I think that's her. Let's actually see what's going on here in this village. Let's see if we can get some answers at some point here. Sorry for the big-ass rambling. I just had to, It felt like my last point. Yeah, I mean, it even says here, the final truth. That sort of felt like, my last opportunity to really just get it out on the table and, let's see what's actually going on. So this is Minagoroshi, the final truth, the massacre chapter. This story introduces the unit inside and out using all the actors. This is no longer a story, it's a public autopsy for all to join. As they say, after loving someone, cut open their belly and eat their organs. I don't think I can get behind that one. It's the same with stories. The difficulty is quite mild, well suited for those with pride. I have 0 pride, so this will be rough. But guys, honestly, thank you all for those that have stuck around through any points of chapters 1 through 6 to help me out with, getting to this point and with the theories and with my thoughts. I mean, shoot, as I was going back through the my older playthroughs, I was just like, wow, I was way off the mark. But it's so cool to see how far we've come. So let us jump in. Oh, I'm excited. I'm also getting a little sick, by the way, so there's also that. I just wanted to throw that out there. So if I fuck up a lot, What are you doing? I don't see you playing by yourself that often. All you could do before was nod to my questions. Since when do you have your own will? I'm glad. I finally have a sister or a brother. Whichever you are. I used to be an existence of nothingness, just like you. But one day I began to have my own identity, my own thoughts, and eventually my own body. So it's not a surprise to see you in possession of your own will. Welcome to this vast yet tiny world, my sister. You might be my brother, but let me call you my sister until I know for sure. This is an endless, eternal, and infinite world. But that doesn't mean it's boundlessly vast. I suppose you could describe it like a ring with a small diameter. While the ring is an eternal, endlessly looping world, that doesn't mean it contains infinite space. Yes, in short, the world is eternally sealed. The future is supposed to be an infinite weave of countless choices. Yet for whatever reason, our world always ends in death. If I were to compare it to something, perhaps a maze of fate would be appropriate. Looping through the same moments forever steadily grows harder and more dejecting, eventually producing something like me. Then, as that draws further on, even one like you is born. And eventually that world may be filled with your sisters too. After that, we'll build a colony inside of it, and once we lose our interest in this maze, Rika Furude will disappear from this world. It looks like you still cling to this narrow world, Rika. Though I lost interest long ago. which is why I'm truly glad that you were born for me to talk to. So what are you doing? Are you collecting fragments of memory? There's only 5 or 6 of them right now. It must still be fun for you, though. There used to be more fragments long ago, but one by one they disappeared into the darkness. Now these are the only ones that remain clear. This is such a cool, this is really weird. for a visual novel especially. Oh, that's not how you're supposed to use it. See? Try and hold it up to the light. All of that is the life of Rika Furude and its end. Ah, yes, a cube. That one is... Oh, I remember that one. That's the world when Keiichi was cursed. Those fragments are like books to me, so I called that one Onikakushi chapter. Do you remember what happened in that one? Good. That makes things easier. In Onikakushi, Keiichi Maibara was consumed by the darkness. The darkness! He couldn't accept the kind words his friends offered him, and eventually beat them to death, not knowing of their kindness. We were all killed after that anyway. Okay, so another thing, by the way, is that I did go back to the very, very beginning of my playthrough of Chapter 1. And yeah, after reading Chapter 6, that is a fucking eye-opener. That is literally what is brought up in Chapter 6. Really, I honestly thought it was the other way around, that we were getting beaten to death or something like that, but no. We were doing the beating to somebody who was just trying to be kind to us. We were all killed after that anyway. That had nothing to do with this story, though. That fragment is the Watanagashi chapter. Shion Sonozaki was cursed in that one. She killed many people out of revenge for her boyfriend's disappearance as he went missing in 1982. Rika worked so hard, but she was captured at the end, and she was tortured to death. That's why she chose to commit suicide in the Miyakashi chapter, because things were going to turn out the same way. That fragment over there is called the Tatari Goroshi chapter. Sorry, these are getting longer and longer. Sotoko's uncle came back and locked her up inside her house. That was the worst world of all. There was nothing Rika was able to do in that world. Whenever Sotoko's uncle comes back, Rika usually just gives up on that world. Fortunately, Sotoko's uncle doesn't come back that frequently. That one is called the Tsumi Horoboshi chapter. Rika was there until just a moment ago. Rena Ryugu was possessed in that world. It was pretty exciting to see her take over the whole school. Honestly, it was really wild, and it really was. It surprised me to learn that Keiichi Maibara had a memory of the other worlds just like we do. It was pretty amazing, but then again, most of us have some kind of memory like that. We all have an imaginary world within us, some idea of what would have happened if you did things differently. It's like the strange feeling you get when you do something for the first time, but it feels like you've done it before. Everyone has a memory of an imaginary world in their mind, but the memory is not always that clear. It's not surprising, really. You are special enough to be able to see those fragments of memory. It's probably very difficult for you to understand how special you really are. You were born into a world where it's a natural thing for you to see these fragments. I was originally born in the normal world. I didn't know until recently that I could collect these fragments of memory. You grabbed those fragments just because you could, but I didn't know how to do that for a long time. I'm sorry. I'm sure you're not interested in hearing my story. Huh? What's wrong? What are you curious about? Oh, you're curious as to why so many different incidents occur in the same world. It's very interesting, isn't it? Why do you think that's the case? Let's think about it together. Thinking is the first step towards playing a game. The main character among Rika's group of friends is Keiichi Maibara. In Onikakushi, he was possessed by suspicion and killed Rena Ryugu and Mion Sonozaki. If that was inevitable, or was an inevitable event, he would be killing them in every world. In other words, what Keiichi Maibara did in Onikakushi was not inevitable. Indeed, the only thing that's inevitable is Keiichi Maibara's role. If Keiichi Maibara was someone with a naturally suspicious heart, he would take the same actions in every world, but that didn't happen. It's true that Keiichi Maibara is both passionate and easily convinced of anything, but it's rare for him to exhibit the kind of rage he displayed in Onikakushi. In other words, even though something might seem inevitable in one world, that may not be the case if you compare it to a different one. If something really is inevitable, it will happen for sure in every life. That's what true inevitability is like, goddamn. It's very important that you know that. When you compare the different worlds, what's common among them, or among all of them, is the truth. Understand? Like I said, what seems inevitable in one life could just be a random event in another. The club activities that Mion Sonozaki suggests are a good example. If Mion Sonozaki had a strong inclination toward playing certain games, you would be playing them in every world. But in reality, you participate in different activities in most of them. That means the games they play in the club are randomly decided by Mion Sonozaki. We know that now because we've been through many different lives. Those who only live in one world can't see if the event in question is inevitable or random. Those who only live once can't predict what's going on in Mion Sonozaki's mind. But we can. Although the activities are random, Mion Sonozaki calls us together for the club meeting almost every day in every life. I can see that Mion Sonozaki holds a strong will towards having the club meeting. Mion Sonozaki always wants to play with the other club members, but she doesn't know what to play. See? We can read Mion Sonozaki's mind just by simply examining these fragments. With this alone, we can see part of who Mion Sonozaki really is. Let me talk a bit more about Keiichi Maibara. For those who only live once, the world of Onikakushi chapter is nothing but a story where Keiichi suffered mysterious hallucinations and beat his friends to death. For them, there's nothing beyond that fact. We, however, can compare different fragments and find out something they could never see. As a result, we know that the murder of his friends was not inevitable. I told you that just earlier. In fact, while there are about 5 or 6 pieces in front of you, he only kills his friends in one of them. That means we can roughly conclude that the possibility Keiichi Maibara triggers the tragedy is less than 20% and is almost a fluke. This means that amongst the countless worlds, Keiichi Maibara causing the tragedy is an unimportant factor. Now you can find the common thread to be drawn from here. You found it already? Have I? So do we just kind of calculate like who's at fault most of the time? That'd be fucking Shion, right? I need to get a drink of some fucking juice here. There we go. I lied, by the way. That's not juice. That's Pepsi. But yeah, I don't know. Like, are we supposed to just assume that Shion is the one that we should be blaming? No wonder you were born into this world. Man, I just bought the game. You're quick to learn the knack of playing with building blocks. I didn't figure that out for a while. I was born in the normal world, so I could only see things from a single world's perspective. I was too obsessed with the fact that Keiichi Maibara caused the tragedy, so I had trouble finding it. Right. That's exactly right. You see it. The Onikakushi, Watanagashi, Miyakashi, and chapters all have something in common. So chapters 1, 2, which one was Miyakashi? That wasn't 3, right? That was 5. And fuck, I don't. Was this the last chapter we just did? So 1, 2, 5, and 6. Someone in the group becomes violent because of dark and paranoid things. In each world, either Keiichi Maibara Shion Sonozaki, or Rena Ryugu become violent as their delusions grew stronger. So why those three? Keiichi Maibara, Shion Sonozaki, and Rena Ryugu are all my close friends, but they were all born and raised differently. The only common factor is that they all live in Hinamizawa. I just said it not too long ago, though. When we peer through these fragments of multiple worlds, the constant phenomena becomes our facts, and the chance phenomena holds little meaning. In other words, the unrelated individual culprits are not all that important. To go further, the violence of their crimes also bears no meaning. Keiichi Maibara beats his friends to death. Shion Sonozaki killed the central people of the three families, and Rena Ryugu took over the school. They were all different. There's nothing in common there. In fact, the very, very important truth is that while the culprit and crimes are decided at random, their process of growing paranoid until they resort to violence is always constant. The suspect changes every time, but the process does not. After comparing the different worlds, this is the truth I found. This is the one truth that is common to all the worlds of Hinamizawa. The rule is that a random person becomes violent under the influence of paranoid thoughts. This is Rule X. Keiichi Maibara, Shion Sonozaki, and Rena Ryugu, pieces with no particular connection, have the potential to succumb to that rule with random probability. I don't know what the probability is that those pieces will be ensnared by that rule. Perhaps there is some rule to that too. Is it because these three are all close in age? Or is it because they all live in Hinamizawa? Well, we're not detectives or police officers. This is not something that a small girl like us, Rika Furude, can easily figure out. At least we now know that there's a mysterious rule in the world of Hinamizawa. People who only live in the world have no way of knowing that. I'm proud of myself for figuring that out. I guess for you it's not particularly surprising though. Huh? What did you say? That's right. If something is common among all worlds, that means it's fated to happen. Some events quickly come to mind, don't they? Right. Jiro Tomitake and Mio Takano are always killed in those worlds. On top of that, they are murdered in exactly the same way in every world. In other words, unlike our previous rule with its variability, their murders are thoroughly planned out by someone with a strong will. So that does not fit with the mysterious vague Rule X that leads to a random individual to violence, or that leads a random individual to violence. After all, they are always murdered, regardless of who falls to Rule X. Therefore, there's another rule to these worlds. A rule that says Jiro... Is it Jiro? No, it's Jiro, right? Whatever. Tomitake and Mio Takano will get killed on the night of Otanagashi. Let's call it Rule Y. Oh, I love algebra. Don't you see how funny this is? Yes. Death and murder. It's so funny. Jiro, Tomitake, and Mio Takano are killed in every world, right? Every time the character who gets cursed always thinks that their deaths have something to do with the danger that's awaiting them. Okay, so I was definitely on the right track here. Especially with Takano. The fact that someone turns violent, Rule X, and Jiro Tomitake and Mio Takano's deaths, Rule Y, are supposed to be two independent rules, but they all tend to link them together. Of course, one could say that's how they become ensnared in the spell of paranoia, leading them to violence to begin with. But do you think that their paranoia, that they notice someone is trying to lead them to link those rules together, that, as I said, in their paranoia, right? God damn, I am losing my mind. Like I said, I am starting to feel a little sick. Yes, whoever the pieces leading them is, they are the one making the stage called Hinamizawa very complicated. You should have noticed at least two suspicious people. Do you know who I'm talking about? Takano, Dr. Coach, pedophile Irie? He's not a pedophile, but goddamn, that man's got some weird thoughts. It's definitely not, Ueshi, he's just weird. Who else is suspicious? Fuck. I'm gonna go with that. Those are my answers. That's right. Okay, you know what? I was close. I didn't think that Ueshi would be suspicious of any way. I'm referring to Kuroda, Ueshi, and Mio Takano. When you compare our previous fragments, the role of the piece known as Kuroda Ueshi becomes clear. He's a detective who is retiring this year, and he's in a hurry to solve the mystery of the series of deaths in Hinamizawa. After he retires, he'll have to move away from the village. And that's why he's desperate to solve this case before he has to leave Hinamizawa. Why is he so obsessed with the serial murders in Hinamizawa? That's right. It's because of the first murder involving the manager of the construction site. The victim was Ueshi's close friend. You will see that if you look at the Himatsubushi chapter. Hopefully I pronounced that okay. This shit's getting harder. Ueshi was there when the dam conflict was at its peak. He saw how the Sonozaki family took control of the Onigafuji Guardians, and he believed that the Sonozaki family was pulling the strings behind the whole incident. That's why he always suspected that the Sonozaki family was behind the series of mysterious deaths, regardless of the evidence or lack thereof. His personal biased belief, combined with his credibility as a police detective, affected the pitiable victims, or however you pronounce that, of persecution complexes in each world. As a result, the pitiful victims of Rule X come to accept the Sonozaki family as the identity of the unknown force their paranoia seeks. Shion Sonozaki's case was the most conspicuous one in that matter. So yes, if this piece Ueshi didn't intervene, then perhaps the victims of Rule X wouldn't have resorted to such violence. So the role his piece plays is to indirectly cause the tragedy. I don't know who named him this, but Oyashiro-sama's servant is the perfect nickname for Ueshi. Okay. I mean, I kind of predicted that as well. I predicted these two. I just kind of threw Ueshi out because, I don't know, I didn't see him as an antagonist necessarily, but Takano here, I kind of do. The other suspicious person is Mio Takano. One would assume the only role of her piece is to amuse herself with research into Onigafuji's dreadful history, and to take pleasure in scaring others with those tales. However, just like Ueshi, she also gives them the idea that the Sonozaki family is behind all the mysterious incidents that happened in the village. She interfered the most with Rena Ryugu. For Mio Takano, Rena Ryugu was the perfect prey, grasping at straws to try and identify the force that she suspected. Ironically, however, Mio Takano always ends up getting killed at the end. If she had survived and seen Rena take over the school, she would have laughed long and loud. Now, have you realized that these two pieces and the roles they fulfill have their own rule too? They talk about the Sonozaki family, and the listeners always believe them. This is Rule Z, and what a humorous rule it is. You should already have an answer to this mystery in your fragments on hand. The fact is that the Sonozaki family always acts as if they are responsible, no matter if they are or not. They always pretend to be the villains in order to make sure the people or that people continue to fear them. But that's, kind of working against them here. As a result, the villagers have believed that the Sonozaki family has been pulling the strings ever since the dam conflict ended. Kurado Ueshi and Mio Takano were simply fooled by that rule. Actually, the whole village is fooled by it. Still, the more I think about it, the stranger the series of mysterious deaths in Hinamizawa seem to be. Do you know why? Nearly all the fragments of memories we have here are from 1983, so I have no idea about the incidents from 1980 to 1982. But it's likely that interpreting these murders as serial is simply a result of falling victim to Rule Z, believing that the Sonozaki family is pulling the strings behind everything. In short, they may be trying to conflate those multiple crimes with which each happened for different reasons into one big case. I'm sorry, goddamn. I'm fucking losing it. While I have no way of discerning the truth from the fragments here, still perhaps something lies in one of them. each case was supposed to have been solved individually after all. We don't know if that theory is sound or irrational, but it might surprisingly be an element we can't ignore. That reminds me, Shion said something intriguing in the Minagoroshi chapter. That curse system she came up with. Do you remember that? Yeah, I do. Her theory was that villagers believe that they are allowed to kill an enemy of the village on the night of Otanagashi in the name of Yashiro-sama's curse, and that this foundation of murder is allowed on that night alone in the true identity of the curse. Since most of the fragments here are from 1983, there's nothing to back the validity of Shion's theory, but there are still interesting things about it. In other words, her theory is that the suspect is not only the one who's committing the crime, it's the environment that's causing the murder. People in a single world tend to analyze a criminal's life to determine the process that led them to crime, but her idea is different. The real crime is committed not by the criminals, but by the environment. In other words, it may only be happenstance that Robber A committed the crime, and the environment of poverty may have created Robber B instead, or perhaps even Robber C. A may not even be a criminal in another world. Therefore, the real criminal is not A, but the environment that creates A, B, or C. And while people in a single world may be able to reach such an idea, the widespread desire to place blame commonly causes A to be lynched by society, while the environment that gave rise to A goes ignored. Did I confuse you? Fuck yeah. Oh, god damn, fuck yeah. I'm sorry. Perhaps that example was actually harder to understand for you. It's easy for me to see it like that because I'm from the normal world. Let me make it simple for you. The culprit behind the tragedy in many worlds isn't individuals like Keiichi Maibara or Shion Sonozaki, but the environment. So Rule X is the true culprit at fault. You're earning good marks if you can grasp that, even if we don't know the identity of Rule X. And if you can grasp the 3 rules governing this stage called Hinamizawa, rules X, Y, and Z, then you're earning very good marks. So long as you understand those rules, then even if this is your first experienced world, you should easily find the truth without distraction. See? Isn't it fun? Merely 3 simple rules are interacting on this stage, creating a kaleidoscope of different worlds. This is probably a very unusual case. In other locations, you shouldn't be able to see such extreme variation even after looping through several worlds. It keeps me entertained, just staying here and watching these worlds revolve. Anyway, there's one more fact that we can understand from these fragments of worlds. This is the biggest problem we Rika Furudes are facing. The fact that Rika Furude always dies each time. Ah yes, Rule R. It's as if June 1983 is a dead end for her. Worse, there's no randomness to it. It's guaranteed to happen. In other words, it's the same pattern as the deaths of Jiro Tomatake and Mio Takano. It's following the same exact rule, Rule Y. Tomatake Jiro and Takano Mio are always murdered on the night of Otanagashi. We're really throwing myself for a loop here with changing their first and last names around. Furude Rika's... Why are we doing that, actually? Rika's date of death is not always the same, but she's always dead by the middle of June. Shiro Tomatake and Mio Takano are probably attacked on their way home, so that's why it always happens on the same night. But for Rika Furude, it's different. She takes different actions in every world, and her lifestyle is very unpredictable. For that reason, the day of her death is not always the same. However, she always dies in June, because a similar powerful conviction vows to kill her too. So can we assume that the same Rule Y killing them is also the rule behind her death? I'm gonna say no. Is the same person killing all 3 of them? I don't know if it's the same person, but it's highly likely the same rule is at work. Is it the same person? Or the same organization? Is it the same views? The same goals? Rika's most important goal is to escape her deadly fate. But it doesn't mean that she wants to just leave the village and survive. She wants to live happily in the village. All of her friends must also be happy too. That's Rika's happy future. The ideal future she hopes for. It's tragic that we can't realize such a simple desire, no matter how many times we repeat this. Though it's a tragedy we're only able to perceive, because we're beings capable of comparing the fragments from different worlds. By the way, I have some interesting information. While Rika is almost always killed by Rule Y, have you noticed that she's killed by Rule X in some worlds? Right. It happened in the Watanagashi and Miyakashi chapters. Rika Furude committed suicide, but you can say that she was more or less killed by Rule X via Shion Sonozaki in those worlds. In other words, this is a blunder for Rule Y. Rule Y is trying to kill Rika with a strong desire to achieve some aim. But she was killed before that, as a result of the unrelated Rule X. And this seems to have some sort of correlation with the end of the village happening, the Great Hinamizawa disaster, because they just seemingly don't happen if this happens instead. That might have caused them to show some disturbance. That hasn't been brought up yet, by the way. If Rule Y's objective is simply to bury Rika, then that's not a problem. But if they have some objective behind that, then that might show up as some other phenomenon. Perhaps the Watanagashi and Miyakashi chapters have something in common, something that doesn't happen in the other worlds. Unfortunately, we are Rika Furude, so we don't know what happens after Rika is dead. Or, by any chance, do you know what happened? Since I'm Rika Furude, I only know events during Rika's life. You, on the other hand, are a special existence who was born in a superior world. Is there anything that didn't happen in the Watanagashi and Miyakashi chapters that happened in all the other worlds after Rika's death? Yeah. If you know anything, then that must be another truth behind Rule Y. The memories I have here are all mainly about the chaos brought about by Rika's friends, that is, Rule X. But its foundation, Rule Z, and the obvious hostility common among all worlds, Rule Y, are what I believe to be the true rules governing this stage. If so, then Rika's path is a thorny one. She needs to fight Rule Y in order to survive. Unless she defeats it, she has no future past June 1983. And to win her own happiness, she must also beat Rule X to win her friend's safety. So long as that's undefeated, one of Rika's precious friends may be led to tragedy. If that happens, then even should Rika survive, she wouldn't have the happy future that she hopes for. She may also have to defeat Rule Z, just as Shion Sonozaki faced it in Miyakashi. I don't know why the names are swapping around here. It's very random. So long as Rule Z remains, then even if she escapes 1983, it's possible another tragedy may lie waiting in 1984. It's extremely likely that Rule Z is the breeding ground for Rule X. Hinamizawa's fundamental belief that the Sonozaki family is behind everything, and the custom that anything can be misconstrued as the curse may indirectly be the root of all evil here. People are not surprised to see somebody die on the night of Watanagashi. That type of thinking is keeping the curse alive in Hinamizawa, where it causes even more tragedy. It's Rule Z reinforcing itself. Rules X, Y, and Z. There are 3 rules that hunt Rika down in the eternal June of 1983. They are all tough obstacles. We didn't even figure out these 3 common rules until recently. Were you aware of them? If you were, I'll give you straight A's. I've tried so hard in the past to break these rules, but I was never successful. However, a miracle happened in the Tsumi Horoboshi chapter. Keiichi Maiburo was able to recognize a small fragment from another world by chance, and he beat Rule X. In the end, Rika was still killed that night by Rule Y though, but still, one rule was defeated. That was a huge leap forward. So I guess that has never happened before. Rika knew there were 3 common rules among the worlds, but she could never break any of them. Eventually she gave up and lost interest in the worlds. That's how I was born. However, she's different now. She learned something valuable from Keiichi Maibara, that the rules can be broken with a strong enough will to fight. If she can break all the rules, Rika Furude will be freed from her eternal prison. She doesn't have much time left though. Rika has traveled through many worlds. Her physical lifespan is not a problem, but her mental lifespan is getting shorter. Mentally, she's extremely old, and her soul is starting to turn into something different. In the end, she'll probably lose the ability to experience singular worlds. She's already showing those signs, and eventually her memories from the parallel worlds will mix together, ultimately causing her derangement and the loss of Rika Furude's soul. And then she will disappear. And that means you and I are going to be left in this dark world. The fragments of our memories will gradually disappear, and we will be left alone in the eternal darkness. Eventually we will die. Rika Furude is aware of that. She knows that her mental lifespan is getting shorter and shorter. Hanyu is also losing her powers. Who? She can't rewind through years of time like she used to. Her power has decreased so much that she can barely rewind 1 month of time. Actually, she can only rewind a few weeks. In the next world, she should only have about 2 weeks of time. Rika Furude is going to try and break all 3 rules in just those 2 weeks. I wanted to know what's outside the well, so I tried to claw my way up there. I wanted to know what's outside the well, so I continued to climb even when I fell and injured myself. I finally realized the higher I climb, the more pain I feel when I fall. When my curiosity toward the world and my physical pain become equal, I finally understood the meaning of the frog in the well. And of course, this is a work of fiction because, you know, lawsuits and legality and fuckery and whatever else. But Chapter 7. Let's get it. Let's fucking get it. So, kind of thinking of that rule situation, it is kind of like how I was thinking about the constants, the variables, what have you, coming up to this in my review at the end of Chapter 6, and also what I was talking about in my rambling here in the beginning of this chapter. So maybe I was on the right track, but there's no way I could think of a rule system. That's way more organized. I felt no gravity in the darkness and lost all my senses as a result. I banged my head on the floor with a dull thud. Seeing stars behind my eyelids, I curled into a ball while holding my head in pain. I had no idea why I was in this situation, but as soon as I heard their voices from the top of the cliff, I realized that I must have fallen. So we're following Rika here. I remember. I was playing behind the shrine with the rest of the club members. I got too excited and started doing something very dangerous, and then the tree branch broke. That's how I fell off the cliff. My body started to ache all over. I remembered how I fell, but I felt strange for some reason. I couldn't remember what I was doing. No, it was more that I couldn't remember who Rika Furude was before I fell off the cliff. I heard Hanyu's panicked voice. Is that I'm assuming that's our imaginary friend here? Oh shit, yep, there she be. I looked behind me and saw Hanyu standing there with a scared look on her face.
Hanyu. これは一体何事なの? リカはみんなと遊んでて崖から転げ落ちたのです。大丈夫なのですか? ハニュ、そんなことはどうでもいいわ。今日はいつ? 昭和何年の何月何日?
I always ask this question first when something like this happens. She finally realized that I was asking the same old question.
昭和58年、綿流しのお祭りが来週なのですから、なんてこと。それしか猶予がないってわけ。僕たちの力も、これが精一杯なのです。
Hanyu muttered regretfully. It was the middle of June 1983. If this really was the best she could do, I had no choice. I couldn't complain. I gradually started to remember more things.
私がまた昭和58年の6月にいるということは、また私は殺されたのか。
After Rena surrendered to the police, all of the classmates were given checkups at the clinic. I didn't get hurt, so I was sent back home after they determined that I had no injuries. And then my memory started getting vague from that point on. God damn it. A common characteristic of my violent deaths. When my life is taken away violently, the memory before death becomes vague with static. It's like a violently ripped roll of toilet paper. That example should make it easy to understand, even if it's uncouth. That's why I have no clear memory of what happened and how I died that night. I only have vague memories. I think someone covered my mouth with a handkerchief or something and I passed out. That's about the only thing that I remember, and only vaguely. I'm not even sure if it really happened. The only thing I know for sure is that I was attacked on my way home, or possibly after I got there, and that I was murdered suddenly. I don't know who killed me or how I was killed. I'm glad that at least I don't remember the horrific ending to my life every time it happens. Because of my experiences, I think I now understand why ghosts wander around this world, not knowing that they died so suddenly, It's a death from a long-lasting illness. People tend to remember that they were sick. They can kind of assume that they died after being sick for a long time. But when your memory is violently disrupted like mine, it can get quite confusing. When I first experienced this, I wasn't sure if I was dreaming or not. I even thought that I hit my head hard and lost my memory. I needed to organize things before I get too confused. My name is Rika Furude. People look at me in a special way, but that's not a big deal for me. All I want is a happy life where I can play around with my best friends. I can't remember how long I've been living just for the sake of obtaining that simple happiness. This panicked girl here is named Hanyu. I'm the only one who can see her. Perhaps she only exists inside of my head? At any rate, Hanyu's invisible and can generally only interact with me. It'll be a long story if I try to explain Hanyu's existence, so I won't be doing that right now. Besides, I don't even know how I should talk about her. She's been there since I was born, and her existence is a natural thing for me. I mean, I'll just accept it. I mean, it's whatever. Obviously not an imaginary friend, that's just kind of how I referenced it. I didn't really know what it was. But okay, I guess it's some sort of supernatural existence for her. Rika in general seems to be quite supernatural. I saw everyone running up the gravel road toward me. They're my important and lovable best friends. Our group's active, boisterous, and we get serious about doing stupid things. I'm never bored when I'm around them, and I love them very much.
Rika-chan, 大丈夫?
Maybe. Okay, we're actually gonna end it here because, yeah, I'm not feeling good. But also, like, that was a lot of talking, and I'm tired. So we'll stop it there, and I'll take what we learned here to start this one off and sort of just think it over. So I'm going to assume that our goal here in 2 weeks' time to beat all these rules is to make sure none of our friends, especially Rena, Keiichi, and Shion, lose their goddamn minds and start doing some terrible things. We gotta make sure that Ueshi and Takano don't do any weird shit. And we have to somehow avoid Rika getting murdered in the middle of June. But that one is going to be the hardest, in my opinion, because we don't really know what is murdering us besides our friends. And by our friends, I mean Shion. Shion, I guess, is that odd one out, but that Rule Y is the one that sticks out because we really don't know who is actually pulling the strings on a few events here. There are some questions that are left unanswered. We don't know who is actually, killing Rika. Obviously, it's someone not of our main group here, or at least I don't believe so. I think all of our friends are totally safe. But something is happening. Something is happening, and it's involving Rika getting violently murdered, and we saw that in chapter 3. That'll be the big one, and I guess that's something that we still have to discover. So this is going to be a fun fucking chapter, I'm pretty sure, because now we got to do some wild Scooby-Doo shit. But thank you all for watching. Thank you for enjoying my rambling, hopefully. And yeah, I'm excited to get going with this one. This was kind of difficult to stay conscious with because, one, I'm not feeling great, and two, I have a new microphone and I'm still kind of working on like the positioning. There's a portion of it that's actually like blocking where I'm reading text, so I need to work on that. I got to figure something out. But audibly, I should be okay. Maybe I should sound relatively the same as I always have, but I need to figure out what I can do for positioning there because it's very distracting and it's hard to keep like a reading flow. Because when I read in visual novels, I actually read ahead and then speak until I trip over my words and then I'm fucked either way. But that's how I read, and I think that's how normal people read anyways. But I need to fix that and also not record when I'm starting to get like a cold or a flu or something. Or sick in general, but will I learn? Maybe not. Thank you all for watching this episode of Higurashi Chapter 7. If you enjoyed, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, all that fancy jazz, and I will see you guys in the next one. Hopefully with a little less rambling. Take it easy, guys.